Welcome back. The organization Women's Empire aims to empower and break down the barriers holding women back. In honor of Women's History Month, the organization will hold an event titled Celebrating Women Who Tell Our Stories, highlighting women who have been active in their communities. Joining me to discuss is founder of Women's Empire, Anika Joseph. Anika, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off, can you just tell us a little bit about your organization, Women's Empire?
So Women's Empire is a not-for-profit organization that was founded by me in 2016 with the desire to do and have more conversations with women, specifically women of color, around topics that we felt mattered. And since then, we have been curating events across Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx that caters to our 5 core principles.
And what inspired this organization?
I would say, so those who've been have had the privilege of going to school, whether high school, undergrad, or even attending a master program, there are opportunities on the campus or through just local education where specific conversation and groups are held to talk about finance, health, wellness. When you're in that working space, you don't necessarily have those types of groups anymore. So what we wanted to do is to continue to have these conversations that you would typically get in a local school or a different type of environment setting and bring that into the community, because we wanted to still have these conversations that were important around health and finance and entrepreneurship outside of that standard educational location.
And when was it that you realized that this was the message that you wanted to spread with Women's Empire?
I think when we started in 2016, the desire mainly came from there, because I noticed there were not that many groups that were offering these types of conversations in a safe space for women, and all women, not necessarily women of color, but for all women. You don't necessarily after work find a group where you're, oh, here, I'm just gonna go talk about health and wellness in this particular space. In most, 9-to-5s, everyone's going home to their families. So we wanted to create that and bring that into the community, and specifically communities of color.
Absolutely. And your organization focuses on the areas of education, finance, entrepreneurship, ending violence. How do some of these models and these concepts lead to the road of women's empowerment?
So we wanted to offer a 360 degree of empowerment in a woman's life. So if you empower a woman in her home, in her workplace, and as well as in her community, and with those 5 pillars we're allowed to do that, cover all of those topics, we felt like that is a well-rounded group of topics that if you empower a woman with these particular educational tools and resources, you're able to make an impact in the home, in their community, as well as in the workplace.
Of course. And the principles Women's Empire follow are created by the UN Global Compact and UN Women. What about these principles stand out to you and that inspired your organization to follow them?
Specifically, what highlighted for us and our team was the focus on gender equality and equity. And that's a big component of the principles from the UN Women. And we decided to incorporate that into our mission and our focus, because we think in the overall topic of empowerment, you need to be able to show that there is a balance that's needed in gender equity and in gender equality for women. So that's why we incorporated those, and we felt like those were validated resources, those were validated principles that we can tie into our organization today.
And on March 30th, women can attend an event titled Celebrating Women Who Tell Our Stories. Tell us all about it.
So this event is a very free event open to the public, and it's our opportunity for us to celebrate women. Prior to 1920, women of color were not necessarily celebrated, and that's Asian American women, Native American, Latino women, as well as Black women were not necessarily celebrated. And this is our opportunity to continue that opportunity of celebrating women who actually play a role since the women's suffrage movement and actually play a role in our history today. So additional to it being focused on a panel of 5 women who we have identified to speak on our very specific topics pertaining to our pillars, we wanted to make this a free and open event to the public to just come out, celebrate whatever your gender, whatever your racial background. This is an opportunity to not miss out on Women's History Month and celebrate. And that's why we're having this free and open event. Usually our events are very focused on educational topics, where we expound on issues of hate crime and gender bias, but we wanted to also incorporate a huge piece of celebration, because how often are women always celebrated?
Absolutely. I encourage everybody to go check out this event. And since there is a focus on women of color, how is the celebration of women a bit different from more mainstream celebrations for Women's History Month?
I don't think it's far too different. I think there is a big focus on gender equity. We are going to cover topics specifically from our panelists who will talk about how they've navigated the spaces as women of color, because we do think it's a bit different. We're all fighting for equity to some degree, and Women's History Month has always been inclusive of all women. However, there are additional barriers that sometimes women of color face. So we wanted to make sure that these women were represented and have an opportunity to tell their story, so it can impact how we also live our lives, so we could navigate those spaces much better.
Absolutely. And can you talk about how you found the panelists and how they stood out to you?
So, but using our 5 pillars, as we discussed earlier, education, finance, entrepreneurship, health and wellness, as well as advocacy, which is our end of violence against women, we wanted to identify a woman in each of these sectors who live in New York City, specifically also the Bronx, so they can bring this information to the table and to women that are attending the event and have an opportunity to share their resources. So we did a lot of research. I have an excellent team who just did some digging, social media, YouTube, Googling, and identifying women across the city who represent those 5 pillars and are open to telling their story.
Absolutely. And can you tell me a little bit about the importance of holding an event for Bronx women?
I think it's important to offer events in spaces where these topics are not necessarily discussed openly. As I mentioned earlier, if you're not necessarily part of a specific group, or sometimes even on a college or high school campus, there is no opportunity to talk about these specific topics in a free setting. And that's one of the things that we want to focus on, is offering a free event. And in the Bronx, we know that there are many different hurdles and barriers for women of color, also for men of color as well. So we wanted to make sure that this is an opportunity where folks can come out and learn more about what is Women's History Month, and why are we celebrating, and why are we tying some of our topics to gender equality. So we wanted to bring that specifically to a community within the Bronx that we know is looking for this information, and we do think that this is information that's valued.
Absolutely. And just tell me a little bit, was there anything specific that you experienced in your work life or personal life that led to Women's Empire and holding an event like this?
I believe so. I am from the beautiful island of St. Lucia, and I would say I grew up, as a Black girl, poor, coming from the island. So being able to bring topics that I was privy to in college and in high school, where I know some of my peers did not get an opportunity to deep dive on, health disparities and, really talking deep down about finance. And I wanted to bring that information to the table, because this information just living with me is no good to it's only going to benefit my family. So I wanted to make sure that we do have subject matter experts all across New York City, and an opportunity and a platform where people can tell their stories, I think, is very, very critical.
Of course. And in addition to this event, your organization has always been about honoring women with special features. Can you talk about why this was important?
So it goes back to this celebrating women. There's a lot of women in many different spaces who are doing beautiful things, beautiful crafts, entrepreneurship from their home, starting businesses. And most of the time, they do not have the opportunity to focus a big budget on marketing and getting themselves out there. So what we do in Women's Empire, we allow women to nominate themselves or be nominated by someone to be featured on our website as well as our social media pages. It's just another way to celebrate the achievements and the things that they're doing. And it's open to any woman who would like to be featured. So we just use our platform, the fact that we do have a following, to share some of the beautiful work that women are doing all across New York City.
Of course. And I want to congratulate you, because in 2017, you were honored 30 under 30 for the first Caribbean woman. So just tell me a little bit about that honor.
That was a beautiful honor. It was specifically the first St. Lucian to be honored with that 30 Under 30 award, and I think it represented an opportunity where there is more that I can do. It was an honor in itself, but it actually paved the way to wanting to do more, knowing that we're still the first in 2017. You're not expecting that, and I went in to receive that honor knowing that the work is not over. It was an amazing opportunity to be around many other Caribbean women who are the first in their islands to break barriers right here in the United States. So it was truly a privilege, but at the same time, it actually put more batteries in my back to do more work to represent my own island, but also to represent the women here.
Of course, congratulations.
Thank you.
And in a minute, I want to talk a little bit about the reception of your event, but this is just one of the many events that your organization hosts. You host theme events and events that men can join. Can you tell me how it helps with ending bias and supporting women's empowerment?
So all of our events are actually always open to men. Men are our allies, and we believe that men specifically, can reinforce some of the things that we're doing. Also just learning about what is this gender equality and what does that necessarily look like. A lot of the time the term itself is completely taken out of context, and you're running a women's organization, people automatically assume that you're not inclusive of men, you don't like men, and that is completely not the truth. So having men at the table is really critical to us, and sometimes we collaborate specifically with men groups. So we can bring both genders together and have that conversation and to understand each other better and to understand perspective. And most of our events are always tied to some sort of social movement. So talking about hate crimes in our community, usually when you talk about hate crime, it's not necessary. You're not thinking of people of color, but there's a lot of specific crimes that are specifically targeted to women and men of color. And we like to talk about that because it's a great opportunity for us to continue and expand on our mission.
Absolutely. I want to congratulate you on your event, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
As a reminder, the Celebrating Women Who Tell Our Stories event will be taking place on Thursday, March 30th at 1345 East Gun Hill Road. Please go to www.womensempire.org to find out more. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Open after this.